Z nami oziroma povabili sedaj k predavanju bomo kolega Andreja Podvršiča. Andrej, lep pozdrav.
Ja, dober dan, lep dan všem in hvala za povabilo.
Tvoje dolgoletne izkušnje nam bodo absolutno danes zelo pri roki in se že veselimo tvojega predavanja z naslovom Corporate Security Threats to Operational Environment of Our Corporations. Tako da, glede na to, da smo v zamudi, bi te kar povabil na predavanje. Izvoli.
Lepa hvala. Najprej bi se zahvalil za povabilo in pa obenem čestitev vsem prejemnikom nagrad ter seveda organizatorjem, ki so v teh težkih trenutkih uspeli organizirati vsakoletni dogodek, tako da vse čestitke, vemo, da to ni bilo lahko in Denis, velika hvala tebi in tvojim sodelavcem. Žal bom pač predaval oziroma bom predstavil svojo predstavitev v angleščini, ker vsi ne veste, da pač sem deloval toliko let v tujini in imam, bi rekel tako, malo omejen slovenski slovarček strokovnih izrazov v korporativni varnosti, bom pa povedal, da aktivno delam na temo. Naslednji slajd, prosim. Next slide, please. Na kratko omenim pač v preteklosti, so a little bit about me with the background. So I was working for Slovenian government for 22 years and I had many high-level government positions. I had a privilege to work with some outstanding people, and I'm just grateful for that experience. Way back in 2003, I joined DuPont de Nemours, which is a world-known chemical corporation, as an EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Pakistan security director. And I was being active as EMEA director until 2015. When I joined as a chief security officer with a spin-off of DuPont Chemours. And recently I had a chance to retire, which is a great news, guys. I can tell retirement is great. And I established my own company in Switzerland, doing consulting on the same items and subjects and services that I was providing to the corporations. Next slide, please. So from the cartoon, you can guess that I'm a Hopes fan. So, and I do believe that this cartoon speaks for itself. That's actually, when you look at it and you don't have to even read it, you see the little boy juggling with the eggs. And of course, at the end, he's creating a big mess of things. That's actually what corporate security is doing on a daily basis. And of course, the challenge is to do it right, with the limited resources and not creating a mess. So, and my intention is to talk about a little bit about the threats that currently all the corporations, businesses, and we as a corporate security managers are facing on a daily basis. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to talk about today is about today's environment, what used to keep me and still keeps me awake, keeps you awake, I'm sure. And then how do I see the future of our business and how I think where the future of the security, corporate security is going to. And make sure that, as I mentioned in the cartoon, that we don't create a mess by doing this. Next slide, please. So, you know, I always say that the picture speaks more than 1,000 words. So my challenge for us here is to really think about today's environment and dynamics. So as you can see, I use the icons saying, you know, the little devil in red and the angels are investors just holding the dollar in between. We are facing with a very active social networks. Social dynamics are so active like never before. And of course, we cannot ignore the little virus who changed the global, had a global impact. We shouldn't be forgetting, you know, with all the fuzz around Corona, we shouldn't be forgetting about the environment, global warming. And please believe me, I'm not Mr. Trump fan, but we are also dealing with a lot of fake news. And of course, with a lot of people being absent from work. So there's a lot of things going on. But my question for us is, has really the environment changed so much that we think it did, a part of the corona, of course? My belief is that the threats are a dynamic environment, and as going back to cartoon, it's us to identify the right risks and threats and deal with them on a daily basis. Next slide, please. So when I was working as an EMEA director for DuPont and CSO for Chemours, that's what kept me awake. And I think there's no change today. So when we talk about, I always divide about the threats into two categories, of course, overlapping among each other. So we talk about external threats and internal threats. And people tend to ask me, what is worse? I think the worst thing is to ignore them. That's the worst thing. So talking about the external threats, and I'm not going to tell you anything new here. When I was in a chemical company, cyber warfare, corporate espionage, natural disasters. I mean, speaking about natural disasters, and I will not go to the conspiracy theories, but COVID definitely changed the whole landscape about threats. Geopolitical changes, migrations, terrorism, volatile markets. We can see that some markets are doing well, extremely well, while some other markets are suffering. Moving to internal threats that we as a corporate security are dealing most of the time. So on top of that, we always say that employees are our most important assets, is our employees' security and safety. We face unethical business conduct. We are facing intellectual property thefts, product tampering. The ones in red are based on my experience working with the corporations and now as being a consultant advising some of the corporations and small businesses that we tend to forget sometimes, and of course startups, which cannot afford to have the organization like corporate security, but they've been really being targeted lately. Next slide, please. So let's go first to our employees. We always say that employees are our most important assets. They are. Now, I like what Richard Branson from Virgin said. Take care of your employees and they will care of your business. It's simple as that. This is really critical even now more than ever because, working remotely, people tend to forget, not to forget. I think that the ties that connect with the company are loosed. So I think as a corporate security, we need to be aware of that. Make sure that they understand they are still part of the bigger organization and they need to protect also the assets of this organization. So duty of care, you all know. So as an organization, we all have an obligation to protect our employees. Now, pandemic challenges. I think there has been a lot of said about that. And different companies adopt to this new reality differently. I saw mega projects spending millions of dollars facing that. I saw, I would say, mid-sized projects, which also were successful. And I saw small projects, but really having already deployed this safety and security culture in advance, those companies are really doing well. Now, our employees are facing all the time constant change. Think about that. In terms of the technology, innovations, demographics, now with the COVID. And of course, we as an employer, we are dealing with the new generations like Millennium Z generations who are used to deal with the information a little bit differently. They are not like, very protective. They're sharing every hour, actually every minute, something on the WeChat or on WhatsApp or whatever social network they are using. So those are the things that we, in a corporate security, we have to think about. But on top of our mind should be always the well-being of our employees. So it's important to stay in touch. I know it's difficult because some of the companies have like thousands of employees. But there are ways of communication to maintain that link to the employees, make sure they understand that they still belong to the organization, and remind them occasionally about the rules of this organization, making sure that the risk-aware culture is all the time present. Next slide, please. Talking about the analytical business conduct. Now, bribery, corruption, I don't have to go through the list because you all know it. I think this area is very important, especially in times of crisis like now. A lot of companies are going through restructuring. They are terminating positions, terminating people, and quite often that will be a justification for those people who are let go to do something bad, So I'm fired. I was working for this company for 30 plus years, and this is what I get as a thank you. So you know what? I'm going to take something with me, which, according to my belief, I'm entitled to. So, think about that too. Also, we have to think about both sides, right? So about staying connected, but also have an eye on what's going on in that environment. Stay closely connected with the HR, human resources, closely connected to the management. Make sure you understand what are the business plans, because that's how you can anticipate what's going to happen next. And of course, there's a fierce competition out there waiting for some key employees having that precious information from the competitor to be hired. So, it's a pretty complex environment currently. Next slide, please. So, one of the, as you saw in my presentation slide, that's my passion, corporate espionage, intellectual property, because, I profoundly and deeply believe that, it's so unfair whilst companies investing millions and millions of dollars or, euros to develop a new product. And by the way, there are many great small size, big size companies in Slovenia developing new products, developing new services, and then, and they are also target. So, of the economic espionage, because that's how the competitors sometimes take the shortcut. Instead of investing a lot of money to develop, they steal the precious information. And then you're surprised because you get the product suddenly on the market that you were supposed to launch in a couple of months. So, I think it's and it's closely linked to the next slide. Please, let's move to the next slide, which is about the intellectual property trade secret theft. Works hand in hand. As I said, millions and millions of dollars are spent to develop a new product and then start to market it and sell it. And it's like a triangle. Usually it goes, not usually, in 99.9%, it's linked to the cyber attack and, of course, internal recruitment, because that's how you get a cross-reference about the information and the entry to the precious information. That's a tremendous loss of value. Some companies went bankrupt. So think about that as well when you are trying to raise the safety and security culture in the company. Think about the intellectual property. What is the value that you have? I think next to the human resources, employees, the intellectual property that the company has, that's the second most important, I would say, asset. There are two ways. In my past, we dealt with several, and there's no, I would say, a rule who's going to do it. Quite often, as I said, disgruntled employees. Now, lately, we face a lot of invitations to participate I would say the industry conferences, or consultancy firm calls you and say, hey, by the way, would you like to learn like 400 euros for an hour and a half chat with one of our customers that we cannot disclose, but it's about your business. Make sure that people know about that. Make sure that people report about that, because that's how your information is going to walk through the doors that you might not even know. So I think raising all the time the awareness of importance of how important it is to properly protect the intellectual property, not just with the IT tools, those are great, but always the weakest link is the human resource. So I think you need to take care of that as well. Make sure, especially now, people working from homes, being detached, and also, as I said before, terminated, that creates a window of opportunity for the competitors. So make sure that you are aware of that. Address this properly, regularly, and runs regular campaigns, let's say twice a year, 3 times a year, a communication campaign, raising the awareness about that importance. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? And I said before, in the beginning, I'm a strong believer that security will move to more enterprise risk management. That's what the ISO 31,000 and 27,000 is also addressing. And, that's what I tried to introduce into my previous employer, that's Chemours, spin-off DuPont. And of course, I can tell you it's not an easy way to do it. You need to convince all the key stakeholders in the company, understanding that only holistically understanding what the risk environment is to our operational, I would say, let's divide these to 3 categories. One is operational, day-to-day. Second is tactical. How are we going to manage, position ourselves midterm? And then it's strategical. What is company planning to do in the next 3 years? Because forget about next 5 years. Nobody has a crystal ball to tell you what's going to happen in the next 5 years. Remember 2008. Now, I think the 2020 will be remembered as well. And I'm sure we're going to deal with another big crisis in the coming years. But nevertheless, so if you really want to be successful, you as a corporate security need to become a key element to this enterprise risk management. If it's not existing, and I know in many Slovenian companies this has been introduced. I talked to several corporate security directors and also the top management, the boards, and it's a good starting point. That's where you need to be. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of, I would say, effort, because the key element is we are always asked to do a lot with less. So that's also the investment, but that's a long-term investment. So it requires some organizational commitment on the C-level. So that means executive level. You need to be able to convince your CEO that they allow you to talk to the board. Tell them about your risks, okay? Now, quite often, companies are, I would say, very interested in one-time exercise, which is good, but this should be evergreen process, because the risk in the environment is changing on a daily basis. And that's what we said, going back to the environment and challenges. The change is the only, I would say, guaranteed sustainable thing. We are facing changes on a daily basis, and you're juggling with all those acts and changes, and make sure that you understand and identify the proper risks and address them with your teams. So I need also in that enterprise risk management, where you are and you will play an important role, it's important to understand the role, have a role clarity, who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what, and who's the owner. Now, like with everything else, there's a cost associated with that. And, not many years ago, we all knew that security was considered as a cost. I think this is changing a little bit, but now some organizations dealing with the difficult financial situation, they are restructuring. And unfortunately, also this has been the case with the corporate security. Now, you have to be smart and become, I would say, a critical element of the enterprise risk management, which will help you to continue to protect the company and also justify your existence. The challenge is on you, actually. Like I had that challenge in Chemours, and it, as I said, it demands a lot of effort. you really need to get to know all the key stakeholders in the company: HR, finance, insurance, name it, logistics. Those are all your partners. You need to talk to them, understand how they work. So, when people are asking me today, what should be the preferred background for this corporate security? I think that today's preferred background would also have to include a profound understanding of the business decision process. Quite often, I was facing questions and challenges that I didn't quite well understand. So I have to go back and learn about, well, what was the question actually about, because it was really profound financial question. And that's how I start to really focus to understand all the businesses and keep my key partners in the company. And that's why the challenges are new. I think I'm close to my last slide. So what is the return of investment of our enterprise risk management? You understand all your risks, because with the risks, there are always also opportunities, and has a strategic value for the company. As I said before, operational, tactical, and strategical. It creates a competitive advantage. I can tell you that introducing the enterprise risk management in Commerce was saving, I would say, around just $150 million in terms of the insurance. It helps you to reach out to other key stakeholders in the company and help you build the risk-aware culture. That means you will face less, I would say, threats. People will be aware of that, and they will come back to you and talk. Use your enterprise risk management tool as a tool for change, because with current environments, with current threats, you need to do something differently, and use this tool as a catalyst for those changes. And of course, as I said before, it's highly appreciated once recognized by the C-level. It helps you also to define role clarities, meaning that every single partner in this process will understand what their role is, what are the accountabilities and the ownership. So there's no mess about who's responsible for what. Sitting around the table, Andrej, that's your job. No, it's not. Dennis, it's yours. So I would challenge us to think about this COVID situation, changes, the threats, and think how you want to address this holistically in a big company, small size company, and even startup. I think there's a lot to think about. I think, the return of investment, doing as I was trying to do with Commerce, it's priceless. Because first of all, you learn your businesses, you create partnerships that they were not existing before. If they were not existing before, they should be existing. You get interest to the board and the C-level, which is critical when you talk about the funding, getting the money. And of course, it allows company to be more competitive and survive in this, I would say, brutal environment that is today. That will be all, and I'm available for the questions. Thank you very much.
Andrej, thank you very much for this comprehensive presentation. I would like to ask you one short question, and then I would like to invite you to the chat rubric to answer all other questions. The first question is related to the dynamic environment regarding the employees. Employees all the time changing some organizational environments. How to provide sufficient level of security knowledge on these employees.
So Dennis, let me ask a question. So we're talking about employees moving from one workstation to another workstation, or is that correct?
Precisely the employees who are changing the organization. So you're working for the DuPont for the 1 year, and the next year you are completely in a different organization. And as a corporate security officer, you have probably quite a challenging environment to provide this security knowledge in these newcomers.
Well, luckily I was working for a big corporation, and we have the onboarding process together with the HR. So there were several trainings modules that all newcomers have to complete in the first 3 months. Among those was also security awareness program addressing from the IT, intellectual property protection, travel security, all those important categories that our newcomers have to understand, and also there are policies they have to apply with, because at the end they sign off that they were trained, they understand the policies, and they will comply. What is great, right? Because sometimes people are asking me, are we doing as a security too much for our employees? There's nothing that we can do too much for them, first of all, but they have also an obligation. We completed our obligation. We provided them the tools, the trainings. Let's say ISOS International, when they're traveling, there's an online program following you, providing you advice. But I, as an employee, I'm also responsible for my safety and security, and also protecting my assets from the company. So it goes both ways, right? As a company, we have a responsibility, but also the employees, as an individuals, have the responsibility towards to the company, but also towards to themselves. So we have the onboarding process. They need to get trained. We are always available. We were like 24/7 available for any kind of questions and support. And at the end, they need to sign off. I understand, I was trained, and I will comply. Because in case, and again, that's not so much present in Slovenia, but in case of some wrongdoing, maybe the employee wants to sue the company, or opposite. So, intellectual property theft, that's where you go back. Oh, you signed, by the way, the document when you guarantee that you understand the policy, that you're not allowed to take anything with you, but you stole this precious information, and now we're going to sue you and prosecute you with the law enforcement and prosecution.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrej. Thank you for your presentation, and of course, I would like to invite you to stay with us for the rest of the conference.
Absolutely, Dennis. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you and to the rest of, and I wish you a successful conference ongoing.
Thank you. Dobro, zdaj bomo nadaljevali z naslednjim strokovnim predavanjem.